before we have our next guest on, I do want to say, just as I managed to get in a few words before you came on, how very impressed I am during this lockdown by our next guest. Juliet Gellatley has got some stamina and some high energy for promoting veganism right now. And this last few months especially has been absolutely standout, and has really been inspiration for a lot of people, because they're just the sheer volume of work, the commitment, the drive, the energy, the stamina I mentioned, doing things like 14 radio interviews back to back. And she still found time to come onto our show, which is very good of Juliet. And again, Karin, thank you for inviting Juliet. And we're very happy, I think, to be joined by such an esteemed and respected member of the vegan community, Juliet Gellatley.
Hello. Thanks for coming on. I know you're such a busy lady, and I want to say, I don't want to embarrass Juliet, but she is such an inspiration and has been for probably 25 years. And I still remember that I opened the magazine called Vegetarian Living. There was one 25 years ago, and this lady stood out to me, and I thought, I've got to get to know Juliet Gellatley. And I just felt for the first time, I'm not alone. And I've been a big supporter and a fan. I don't want to cry, bloody Peter. Juliet makes me cry. I just have no words. This lady is incredible, the biggest mover and shaker. I know we've got Tim, we've got other, but Juliet Gellatley and Viva just takes everything to the next level. So thank you, Juliet. And sorry I'm a bit gushing, but I'm your fan.
I can remember our first meeting, Karin, which must be, 2 decades ago. No. When you came to Viva's offices, when we were in our first proper offices in Brighton. And you were so enthusiastic, and Glyn was there, and you were like, okay, I want to help you. And I said, okay, set up a local group, and that's what you did. I've been in touch ever since.
Oh, I'm so pleased you remember that. Oh, honestly, I don't want to cry. You're doing amazing things. But like we did maybe with Peter and the Dambsky, and, I want to just take it right back if we can. Because you must have had such a big turning point, because your whole life is dedicated to the animals, to veganism. What was it all those years ago that was that turning point for you then, when you thought, no, this is wrong and I have to do something about it? What was that?
I was brought up as a meat eater, out and out, and didn't know any vegetarians and hadn't even heard of the word vegan. And I know it's really hard for people to understand this now, but there was no Google, there was no online presence at all. So if you believed in something, you couldn't, automatically access a group of like-minded people. And there was nobody in my school who felt the same at all. My mum said when she's talked back about it, that she's just said you fought for the underdog, and it was just something in your nature right from the beginning. You were rescuing animals. I rescued a cat who had 3 kittens in my wardrobe. And so it went on. And I think in answer to your question, I then found out from a leaflet actually about factory farming, and was horrified and very naively thought, all I have to do is tell people about this and people will instantly change. Of course they will. Why wouldn't they? And I thought, I'll find out about this myself. And being the bolshy bugger that I am, even as an early teenager, I managed to wrangle my way into the biggest factory farm then in the UK, which was in the Midlands, and saw it for myself. And that was truly the changing point. I didn't know it was the seeds for Viva, but of course it was. And I actually manoeuvred my whole life from that point onwards to be able to fight for animals. I did my degree in zoology specifically to understand animals. And, from that point onwards, everything was geared. I was just so determined I was going to do something to change the world and help people become vegan. And I did think it would be an easier job than it has been. And I was warned off it by people very close to me saying, why don't you campaign on something much simpler where you'll get a lot more money? People won't give to this. They don't want to change. but I've been at it ever since. And as you obviously both are more than aware of the changes that we've seen, it seems slow sometimes, doesn't it? Painfully slow, especially when you know the consequences of not being vegan. But on the other hand, if you look at it as a point in history, the change is incredibly fast now, I think, and will get ever faster.
How long ago was that? Because we're not talking 5 years ago, are we? 10 years ago?
No, I am 105, Karin.
So well. All that vegan food.
Viva's 26 years old this year.
Yeah.
So I started campaigning before that. So I've been campaigning over 3 decades. Shit.
But you wouldn't change it. I mean, what else would you do? Do you think, oh my gosh, I wish I'd done this, I wish I'd done that? I mean, I couldn't think of anything else that I would do, but obviously you're at a much higher level. Would you want to do anything else, Juliet?
I think there was a real need for Viva when Viva was founded. There wasn't a campaigning organisation, and we were like pretty much the first to go out doing the investigations on factory farms. Yeah. It needed exposing very much so, and sadly still does today. So no, I wouldn't change it. Definitely not.
Who are these guys? I do know, but
who are they? Finn's the one standing up, and Jazz is the one sat down. So they're my twin sons, and they are 18 in 3 weeks. Good God. So they've been, brought up vegan, and I just thought, people can kind of forget that you've got a family life and you've got other sides to you and all the rest of it. So I just wanted to show Jazz and Finn, because obviously I had them after I founded Viva, and so they've been, with me throughout that whole experience of having a mum who's running a campaigning organisation, bless them. And I just wanted to say about Jazz and Finn, it's interesting. Kids go through different phases. It's very different for them, because I was brought up a meeting to where they was, it's the opposite. So they went through a phase when they were sort of like questioning that, and then came through that. They had the peer pressure kind of thing when they were at 13, 14. And I have to say now they feel so strongly about veganism and so passionate. And in fact, Jazz spoke at Camp House, and he spoke out for Regan Russell in honour of her recently. So I'm just so proud of them.
They're lovely. And who's this then?
Well, this is excuse the cliche of the name, it's Peppa Pig. she's actually, so we formed Viva Poland many years ago now. That's a whole story in its own right, forming another organisation in another country. But Peppa Pig is part of Viva Poland Sanctuary. We have about 200 animals there just outside Warsaw. This is me in what was called Necton Farm over in Norfolk. So these animals are breeding sows, and they are in what are called the rape racks. So I made a connection with one of them who had the bluest of blue eyes, and we called her Blue. And that was one experience I found very, very difficult indeed, because you find mechanisms of coping with this stuff, and she just broke through all those barriers. And I found that pretty difficult to deal with, I must admit. Yeah.
Gosh, it must be. I mean, what you have seen and gone through, you do this, Juliet, and no one else can. I mean, there are very few people. I mean, I'm passionate about veganism, as you know, but to go through things like this, I don't think I'm a strong enough person.
I think you do have to be a certain type of person, because years ago, I'm talking now, but I remember somebody, blessed her, she was going to get in her local slaughterhouse and film, and actually she did. It doesn't matter how, but she did. And she actually had a breakdown afterwards. It was just entirely the wrong thing for her to do. And, I stayed friends with her and, tried to mentor her in campaigning in other ways, because she felt this need that she should be there seeing it. Some people, it's not the right thing to do. There's a million things you can do to promote veganism. And as long as you're doing something positive, that's what counts. Obviously you need to do the investigations. Yes, you're right. It does take a certain kind of personality. And I think, fortunately for me, and I do think it's genetic, I am able to bounce back. And some people find that much, much tougher. I have built mechanisms to cope with it over the years. Don't ask me what they are because I just don't talk about it, and that's one of my mechanisms. So yeah, it's just been a very necessary thing to do because it's all hidden, as you well know, and people need to see it. I mean, it was seeing those images myself that changed me, and I know has changed millions of others.
That's amazing.
What it went on to was the Paul McCartney one. Just before this one was oh yes, that was it. I was the winner of the first, the Pride of Britain Awards, which became an annual event. And I remember that because Paul McCartney chose me himself, so they couldn't say no. I have it on fairly good authority at the time that they really didn't want me to win. They wanted something much more mainstream to win.
No!
Yeah, but Paul McCartney insisted, and so I was the first one to get that award. And I can remember standing in this hotel. It was the Dorchester, and it was every British actor stroke pop star you can think of that was big at the time. And it was the Spice Girls. It was the Prime Minister was there, who was Tony Blair at the time. Richard Branson was there. It was Cilla Black, who was huge at the time. And I remember going up to take this award of Paul McCartney and standing in front of them, and they'd said, like, don't speak. And I thought, I won't say, I was going to swear then. I got 10 minutes into swear. So I'll just go beep to that. And I went up to the microphone and went, I was so proud to win this award in Linda's name because, and then I just went into one about why veganism was the future. And it just went, I'm not kidding, it went deathly silent. You could hear a pin drop. Really and truly. So this is going back. So it's the first award. So what was that, about 99? And I just thought it was a nice little memory to show you of something, and also a reminder for us all of things have really changed, because a lot of those stars in that actually changed themselves after that. I sat on a table with a boxer who was like, "Oh, Juliet," and at the end of it, he goes, "Oh, I'm thinking about going vegan." And it was quite an event. It was, and it led to some useful contacts as well. I went to dinner with Paul McCartney after it as well, and all that kind of stuff. So it was, it was good. It was good. It's always nice to win an award. It's not something I think about very much anymore at all, obviously, in terms of that kind of things, because I just tend to live day to day and look at the future. I don't tend to look back. But you asked me for photos, so I know.
And it's really nice to get to know more of you and to get more, more of things that have happened. It's really exciting. And, I think it would have been such a shame to not have that opportunity. Like Joaquin Phoenix really doing his big speech, isn't it? And it's waking people up, which is
absolutely it's so unusual still, really, to get people as outspoken as him, and it tends to be people who are very secure in their career. He's kind of, I wouldn't say beyond criticism, but he's proved himself. Can we put it that way?
Definitely.
I mean, even I don't know if you do find it, but even today I found with some younger stars who are not quite there that they're much more scared of really being very outspoken, whereas some of the older stars, put it that way, are doing so much good and using their position of power to influence people in such a good way. I mean, Lewis Hamilton, when we launched Hogwarts, the documentary, very recently, he went on Instagram and actually asked all his followers to watch it. And, we didn't know that was going to happen. And I was just like, whoa, and immediately 22,000 people had watched the trailer before it even launched. And that kind of helps. Very useful.
Of course it is. Using their power to influence for the good and to help people realise that it's a fantastic decision. It's the most important decision you are ever going to make in your life is to be vegan. There's no other more important decision, I don't think. Tim, did you? Yeah.
No, I was just going to, confirming that the impact of it is so much bigger than most people are aware. I mean, the vast majority of people, you have to remember, in the UK do still consume meat. So there's still, a big way to go. But every way we turn now, I mean, from the latest, well, I would say the latest pandemic, as if it's over, it's certainly not over, but from pandemics through to antibiotic resistance, which is going to be one of the next biggest issues we have to face, And I think the other one that we've not even begun to understand and face in Britain is food security. And we at Viva, one of the things going forward, are looking at a vegan Britain in terms of mapping out what Britain could look like, which is a real pleasure for me to do, because I've spent so much time explaining to people why they need to change. And it's so lovely working with agriculturists on something so positive, because we're in a very privileged position in a temperate climate. We've got very good soils. We can do so much with Britain that we can pretty much be totally self-sustaining if we want to be. And not everybody can say that. So there's a lot to work with, and there's a lot of work to do, not least trying to, because unfortunately with stuff like this, you do need governmental involvement, and then it becomes, it slows it all down and it becomes more difficult, because I'm used to doing consumer campaigning. And I chose that very deliberately, because I've always thought politicians, certainly in the UK, follow public opinion. They don't need it. So you need to change the people, and you need them to demand change. And of course, that's what's happening with industry now. It's the fact that they're seeing that demand is out there, and that's due to consumer campaigning. And that's what Viva's always focused on. And it's empowering, because although you've got all the horror of what's happening to animals and the environment, and to people's health for that matter, the other side of that coin is the fact that thousands of people contact you saying something Viva's done has changed me. And so you're empowered back and you're reinvigorated to carry on. Whereas with political campaigning, that can be a much slower, tougher road and much more frustrating. But we now are at the point in the world where we need intergovernmental cooperation to do things like ban factory farming. And I really mean that. And I fancy a day when meat is banned. And it's not something I used to talk about, because banning something kind of goes against the grain, for in some ways, that you want people to come to these things naturally. But I think the urgency now is here, where we've kind of gone beyond it being a choice, and what choice do those animals have, what choice does our fragile planet have, and all its wildlife. So I think the next 10 years are going to be very big years, very, very big years, very big years for the vegan movement worldwide.
Wow. Can you tell us a little bit more about the film at the moment? Because that's the current big focus of Viva right now, isn't it?
So we launched Hogwarts very recently, and that's on Amazon Prime, Apple Play, Google Play. And it's just gone worldwide to about 60 other countries as well. And the response has been overwhelming and overwhelmingly positive. So, and I don't, you don't know that that's going to be the case, do you? That was a difficult documentary. It's a short documentary, but I can announce that we have just won the British Film. Hang on, let me get this right. The British Film Festival. We were nominated by them for 2 sections, and we've won the section on animals. So that is really, we were up against really stiff competition as well, in much easier fields, if you know what I mean. So they've gone for the more controversial documentary. So I'm so delighted by that. We haven't actually announced that anywhere else yet. So that's fabulous. So to get that kind of mainstream support. But Hogwarts, you probably are well aware, we filmed in Hogwarts, which is a so-called mega farm. So in the UK now we have these class of mega farms. So they're obviously the extra large ones. They were supplying Tesco, our biggest retailer. And we went in 2017, 2018, and in 2019. And I have to be honest, I genuinely thought, after all the years of my investigations, that Tesco dropped them, like the proverbial hot potato, because the neglect in there was so severe. And I've seen a lot. And they didn't. They just dug their heels in and said, we'll work with the farm to improve. And so the going back in was hard, because all the farm had done, in my opinion, really spend £50,000 on high security and not on the animals at all. So all it did was make it a lot more difficult for us to get back in. But we did, and we filmed again. What we found was so bad that we stopped the investigation and called the police and vets. Just terrible place. We contacted Tesco again. I have to say, amongst all this, the response from the British public was phenomenal. We got massive national media support. We got support from the British meat-eating public, because even you'll understand this, but they'll say they want to eat meat, but not from conditions like that. You know what I mean? It's part of the process of them shifting their psyche. and their understanding of what we do to animals to eat them. And so the support was huge. And then in the end, in 2019, we left hidden cameras, and that's when we got them hitting the animals. And then Tesco, it wasn't because Tesco cared, it was because Tesco could not justify any longer supporting this mega farm. And so they did drop them as the Cranswick Foods. Nobody's heard of Cranswick Foods, but they're huge. They're one of the biggest pork suppliers in the UK. And they dropped them and said they would never deal with them again. But the much more important, bigger point for me was one of the biggest questions we get from the British public when we do things like the 3D footage, and you get people who really haven't got a clue about factory farming, and you'll get people from every walk of life sharing this stuff, and we go to city after city after city. And the thing they really can't get their heads around is that this is legal, and that when we expose it, it isn't just shut down immediately by the authorities. And again, it's going back to those tinted spectacles I had when I first came into this movement. And I thought the same, all we need to do is expose it. Of course, the government will shut it down. How could this be going on in the UK? And so Hogwarts, part of the explanation for people to make it clear what organisations like Viva are up against when you expose something. And that ultimately, it goes back to what I was just saying a minute ago. It's down to you, the individual, to take responsibility for your own choices. Because the government doesn't take these choices for you. They support factory farming through and through, as do the supermarkets who prop it up and lie. So we've just, and I say that with absolute confidence, because we just exposed Morrison's, who two farms supplying them. I won't go into the cruelty and the gore. I'll just take it from me, terrible, okay? But it was Morrison's this time. Morrison's lie to the media and say, Viva have exposed these farms. Those farms do not supply Morrison's. And they will go on national media and say that. We go back and say, well, that's strange, because we've taken photographs of where these animals go. And it's a slaughterhouse that's exclusively owned by Morrison's for Morrison's. And then they just go silent. And that is the modus operandi. That's, again, it's trying to get the public to understand that these big corporations lie through their teeth. We don't. And we've got, sweet all money. But we do have truth on our side. We don't need to exaggerate that truth, because the truth is so bad. But they do. They have loads of money, and they don't have good on their side. It sounds, a little bit cliched, but it is true. And so their modus operandi is to get the media to withdraw the story, to not make a comment or just say they don't supply us. It is so barefaced and so brazen. But a lot of the media will fall for that and pull the story. And they did it with us. We had it placed in a national. They pulled on it because Morrison's wouldn't comment. We went back in through other journalists and actually managed to place it. In fact, it went on the Daily Mail Online, which is the biggest online service in the world. And then it went out wider than that once it was placed there. But believe me, it can be a tough job to get this stuff out to the public. So, yeah, it's investigating. It's hard, but it's exceptionally necessary. And there's a strange. It sounds contradictory, but in the UK and beyond, we've got a situation where factory farming is becoming more intensive, more and more and more intensive. And yet at the same time, veganism is exploding. And it sounds contradictory, but the two things are running parallel at the moment. And what we've got to make sure is, of course, that veganism gets to the point where it's just not worth their while factory farming any animal anymore, and that the British public just put them to shame and just don't. We just don't allow this as a people anymore. And I do believe that I genuinely do believe we are heading towards that point.
Juliet, that's just amazing. I know Tim might have a question. I know I could talk to you for about 8 hours, if not longer. But you have confidence, you have an inner strength, you light up the room, you really know your stuff. What keeps giving you the drive to go on and forward? 30 years of campaigning, you've made huge differences all throughout the world. I remember in Australia, Poland, all over the UK. What drives you? So we can take it on board and, have some of it ourselves. What drives you, Juliet?
what drives me first and foremost are the issues themselves. Is I've looked into the eyes of so many animals. I'm not going to give up ever. I will fight till my dying day. That gives me energy. Rather than it dragging me down, I allow it to energize myself. Secondly, you have to take care of yourself. There's no point being a martyr to the cause. You know, you must take holidays, you must take breaks, you must give time to your family and your partner, so that you always come back to this fresh. I will go away from Viva, and as I'm away, sort of like literally physically away, I will be thinking up lots of new ideas, and they will become really obvious to me that that's what we should be doing. And that comes to me precisely because I am away from the everyday routine. And so it's giving yourself that space to do that. And thirdly, it's surrounding yourself with people that support your organisation. And obviously our organisation now, because it's, you know, relatively old, is filled with thousands of supporters that believe in what we do, and back up what we do. So having that support means everything. And so it means that when you do something like call a day of action, you can actually fulfill that. You know, with Hogwarts, we did an investigation within 4 weeks. We were outside 150 different Tesco stores across the UK. You know, that does not happen by accident. That's a lot of building and nurturing people. But it's not just us nurturing them, they nurture back. And you know, there are just so many nice people involved with Viva. So that's an energising force too.
That's amazing. Thank you, Juliet. Tim?
Juliet, thank you. It's been a pleasure. I really appreciate you giving up your time to come on, because I know you're really busy.
That's a pleasure.
I think the listeners will have had a really interesting insight there, because I think you talked about one or two areas perhaps I don't always talk about. So thank you for inviting Juliet. We've had some fantastic guests. We had Peter on earlier, Juliet, who obviously is a big Viva supporter, and it is really good to have people who are basically kind of, I wouldn't, you know, basically taking lead. But the leadership is about inspiring other people to lead themselves. And when you see people stand up and just get on with it and do their very best tirelessly, it is an inspiration. That in itself, and I know Peter does a lot of that, but I know you do even more of it. So there you go. Thank you. Not just to you two, though. I know you've got a very hard-working team.
Yeah, absolutely.
Don't always get the limelight. I know you take the limelight because you're the right person for the limelight. But of course, behind you is a really hard-working team, dedicated. You don't always get much gratitude. So on behalf of everyone here, thank you to all the Viva team.
Yeah, the Viva team at the moment is particularly strong. I'm really proud of the staff, and a lot of them have been with us for years. So they are. They're
really showing. They're really glowing. You've been so dynamic in this lockdown. I mean, you know, really streets ahead. It really has been a whole. You've seized the moment. Talking of moments, we have come to the moment where we're going to say goodbye. I wish you very well. Thank you again for coming on, and we hope to see you again soon, Juliet. Good luck with everything.
Juliet. Thank you for everything. An inspiration to me for many years. Thank you, and to many others. Thank you.